welcome to Thoughtful Disagreements podcast, where we sit down and have conversations to show that, two people can sit down and talk about something that they don't agree on and be able to walk away from it, maybe, hopefully, coming to a solution. And if not, at least we walk away with a thoughtful disagreement, knowing that we have that open channel of communication where in the future we can talk about these sorts of topics again, just so that we can build bridges and have a better, more cohesive community. Today, I have my friend Brandon Julius. He is a person that I worked with several years ago, really amazing guy. He co-founded the Volunteers for Ukraine humanitarian organization. He's a Marine Corps veteran. He served as an infantry leader, and he's currently doing private security and involved with the groups the Young Republicans and Turning Point USA. So, Brandon, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the warm introduction. And it was amazing working with you several years ago. That was an awesome experience, and you were definitely a very inspiring person to work with because you were very smart. So it was always fun listening to you talk as well. So I'm glad.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you get to be my first guest. I think we got a good feel for it when you and I had a chance to talk about some other things that were going on. But, today, what I wanted to ask you to come and chat with me for is I noticed you made a Facebook post about RFK Jr. and autism. And I'll let you take it from there on what the post said, because, I honestly don't remember verbatim, but you can also, just kind of tell us what your thoughts were and what you've got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my Facebook post, I was kind of just pointing out a bit of a hypocritical standpoint when it came to, I don't know if I would call it hypocritical, but it is definitely a conflicting standpoint when it comes to the left's ideology on abortion. For the past, I'm consistently watching a lot of debates. I watch debates. I enjoy Andrew Wilson. He's probably one of the best debaters out there on the right. And when it comes to the left, I also watch Destiny, and he's also one of the best debaters there on the left as well. So one thing I consistently see in debates when it comes to the pro-choice movements are people who justify abortions by basically, I've heard a lot of the justifications for abortions saying, well, what if the child is going to be born and have these disabilities? And I also hear people giving their own testimony saying, yes, I got an abortion because my child was going to be born autistic. I don't want my child to be, I don't want to have an autistic child because I think that's bad for the child. And, that's also, I'm not capable of taking care of an autistic child. I've heard that justification before in a lot of different debates. But that's the consistent thing that I've heard from the pro-choice movement. So just from my kind of how would you say it? My experience, arbitrary experience, my spirit experience alone, just seeing that stuff thousands of times, because I watched thousands of debates over the course of a year. It's insane. And that's the consistent point that I brought up. So I was pointing out the hypocrisy, and I think in the post I said something along the lines of it's interesting watching the hypocrisy of the left talking about how RFK Jr. Shouldn't be trying to mitigate autism or looking into ways to mitigate it, while at the same time, the past few years they've just been justifying abortions by stating, well, what if the kid's going to be born autistic? It's like, okay, well, at that point, what do you want somebody to find a way to mitigate or explore paths to mitigate the chances of somebody getting autism? And that's kind of what RFK Jr. is doing. He's simply exploring routes that for some reason are being seen as, I've heard people say, oh, he's trying to just kill autistic people. That's the most dramatic thing that I've heard, which of course most people I don't think actually believe that. That's ridiculous. I've seen some people say that, and I've seen some people say, there's nothing wrong with autistic people. And I'm like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with them, but at the same time, yes, it is a mental disability that could have occurred due to a variety of unnatural factors that occur throughout somebody's life that's giving birth to this child. There are a variety of reasons why somebody can become autistic, and a lot of them are unnatural reasons, whether it be shots, food with artificial ingredients in it, certain water there in California, I guess, that you drink, and it turns out the water supply is actually just kind of messed up and, practically poisoned in a very micro way that kind of takes effect on your body over time, kind of like microplastics in your body as well. So there's a variety of reasons, but that's kind of the gist of my perspective surrounding that. Now, I don't really have a foundational kind of platform on that right there. I was just kind of pointing out a bit of a bizarre thing that was occurring in society when it comes to that.
And I appreciate you pointing it out. And, I think the reason that it caught me, because I think if I remember correctly, I didn't react to it in an emotional way, no emotes, no liking it or anything like that, but just left you a comment that was like, hey, me, let's chat about this. But the challenge that I had is, as far as my research, because after I saw your post, I went and looked, we can't tell if a child's going to have autism until after they're born. So I'd say it's just that particular post caught me off guard, because I'm like, did I miss something? Can we tell that kids are going to have autism now before they're born? And I was wondering if maybe you had seen something more about that, because I went and I looked, and best that I could find, the only way you can see genetic markers that may indicate autism, but just because a child has them doesn't mean they're going to be autistic, and that you really can't tell autism sets in until usually around 18 months to 2 years of age. So, that was part I was hoping to, get clarification where you came up with that idea.
So, I mean, as far as I know, a little ways into the pregnancy, I've read various sources, and I don't have them up here. I need to start bookmarking these sources and putting them in my notes. That way I have them on hand for these types of discussions. But further into the birth process, much further, as far as I know, they can start to see, and it goes back to what you said, that you can kind of tell if there's potential for it. And the potential for it, I think, is where things can actually start to, we're scientists, and I don't know the scientific process. I know that scientists are very smart guys. I know that they're capable of finding ways of mitigating things or exploring different patterns that occur when it comes to parents who give birth to autistic children. They can research the parents. They can research what's occurring during the process while the child is inside the mother's womb. They can start researching varieties of things in order to kind of mitigate the potential of it. And I'm no scientist, but as far as I know, that's a potential avenue, and that's actually what's being explored right now under RFK Jr. So that's kind of my thought process there.
Okay. Well, I mean, anytime if we can find out what's causing something, I don't think that there's anybody that's a rational, sane person who's going to, look at that and go, oh, We don't need to know what's causing something.
Well,
And once we
that's
know
where I would
it's
disagree.
what,
I'm sorry. That's where I would
go
disagree,
ahead.
though. And the reason I would disagree is because of what we're actually seeing. Because all RFK Jr. said was he was going to look at ways and look at reasons behind why autism happens and how to mitigate it, if not, pretty ambitiously eliminate it. That's very ambitious. But when he said that, there was an outcry, basically. And this is something that I mentioned earlier. You would think that the rational person would think that way. Of course, we want to mitigate something that clearly has life-altering effects, not just on the autistic person themselves, but also on the parents. The parents, not that the child is a burden, but of course there are additional heavy responsibilities that come with having an autistic child. And then of course you have the child themselves, which of course I've met. I have autistic family, and they're very happy people too. I love them.
Sure. But back to kind of the autism thing, and I think one of the things that has been my stance, because when it comes to the idea of abortion and being pro-life or pro-choice, my first lead out is I really don't feel that as a male, as a man, I have much that I should be saying about, what a woman can or cannot do with her body. I do have an opinion. When you start having somebody else dictating what another person's able to do, and one of the biggest challenges that I see when it comes to coming up with some form of, really anything above, I don't know what they've done in Tennessee, if they've done anything there, but in Ohio, they passed an amendment that codified the right to get to an abortion. It basically put Roe v. Wade back into play in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And, for me, we don't have any laws on our books that tell any other person that they have to sacrifice their life, other than having the selective service draft for males over the age of 18 if we have a war. That's the only thing that we have on our books that mandates that somebody may have to, put their life at risk. And even though that risk is small, if you look at it, and it's been a while since I've got into my abortion figures and whatnot, but it's, surprisingly large for as developed of a nation as America is, the number of, fatalities that we have or complications that we have that are involved with pregnancies. And I just think we're getting into a really dangerous ground if we're going to make a law that says, hey, you have to risk your life. You're pregnant, you have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Whenever I do think a man should have the rights to also decide. I am anti-abortion. I follow, and I'm anti-abortion not because I'm Christian. I have a more of a secular view when it comes to a lot of this stuff, because when you get into the Christian or religious perspective, that tends to make an easy path for people to be like, well, I'm not religious. Like, you don't get to dictate, to me what your God says about me. It's like, no. The reason why I'm pro-life is because I have a very secular view when it comes to this, and I listen to 3 women in particular. So people say that men shouldn't have a voice when it comes to this stuff often. Yet there are a very large amount of women, including all the women in my family, who are also pro-life as well. So I listen to these 3 women. They're all scientists. They have a page called Secular Pro-Life. And they also have a website where they go case by case and research all of these cases about women who have supposedly died due to complications in pregnancies and stuff like that. And they also go through abortions and the complications that occur with abortions. So I'm not too edgy. I'm not going to act like I'm the most educated on this topic. The only reason I have this perspective is because of these women that I listen to, and I would just encourage people to actually go to their page. They're secularists, they're agnostic, they're atheists, and they have a scientific viewpoint when it comes to this, especially, I hear the comparison to parasites all the time, but parasites don't have the 7 pillars of life that a baby does. So that's always a very ridiculous and false comparison to begin with. But yeah, basically my perspective on it is, if a woman can, say they decide to get pregnant, why should the woman have the right, when they agree on getting pregnant, to get rid of a baby, but the dad doesn't get the right? That seems very unbalanced there. I'm trying to think of this analogy that I've heard somebody use when it comes to this balance here. Overall, though, when it comes to certain situations, I can see people's justifications. I can see their frustrations, like in the cases of, rape, I'll call it that, for monetization purposes, or, incest and stuff like that. I can see cases being made for that, but I don't think that makes a life any less valuable. The circumstances of the method at which she got pregnant shouldn't dictate the value of the baby, I don't think. Did I lose you there? I think I may have lost you. Okay.
We've got back up. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I posed you had mentioned what I heard last, clearly in there. You were mentioning rape and incest, and I would like to, what about, health of the mother, or just plain fetal inviolability as caveats to add in there as well?
Yeah, so I'll address those. So, I don't think the circumstances of the pregnancy should dictate the value of the life that comes with it. So I've watched a lot of speeches of men and women who were both conceived from rape. I've watched a lot of speeches of them, and their speeches are always very emotional. Not emotional as in they're being emotional, but it's emotional for the people listening to it. It's like, yeah, the mother endured quite a bit, and she endured even more having this child. And it's like, I could understand the mother having some sort of animosity towards the child, even though the child is completely innocent in those situations. These speeches they're always so inspiring to listen to. It's the circumstances, though, I don't think should dictate the value of the human being itself. But like I said, I understand where people are coming from there, and the amounts of cases of pregnancies through rape that happen are astronomically low. As far as I know, the last statistic I looked at last year, the vast majority of abortion cases are abortion cases where I don't remember the exact verbiage of it, but just, the mother got it not due to any health complications, not due to any incest or grave complications or anything like that, just because the mother wanted to, perhaps due to a financial standpoint or due to just not wanting a child yet. And those account for the vast majority, say probably over 97, 98% of abortion cases in general. There was another point that you brought up earlier that I'm attempting to recall at the moment.
I understand the Supreme Court doesn't really have the power to do that, to execute in the way that I would have done it. When they decided to take Dobbs to replace Roe versus Wade, is they didn't really provide any guidance. So that led to some people, where you're having a pregnancy that isn't going to be a child. But because of the lack of explanation of like, hey, yes, this is okay to do, you've got people that are, having to sit in a hospital waiting for basically sepsis to set in before a doctor is willing to do it.
Yeah, I know which case you're talking about. You're talking about a specific case. I think it occurred in Ohio, and this was actually a case that occurred because of abortion. It didn't occur because because the woman was waiting around for it. She went to a different state as well. I'm pretty sure that's the case that you're talking about. The sepsis was due to
I've heard like several cases, several, at least 2 or 3.
Yeah, the sepsis, and I know in one of the cases, was due to a botched abortion, actually, because I believe a piece of the baby may have been left inside of the mother's body, or there was something just ridiculous that kind of occurred at the abortion clinic that resulted in the baby not being fully removed or something like that. A lot of these cases I hear, though, again, I would refer people to secular pro-life. These are women who go to these cases, they research these cases, they also call the hospitals, and they kind of gather information about how abortions and stuff like that are done to begin with. And they actually find that there have been no cases that have occurred like that, because getting an abortion due to an inviable baby, a baby who died in the womb, isn't illegal in any states. I've looked it up and I haven't found any cases where that's actually happened. Rather, I found news articles of, people basically skewing most of these cases. And then you go and you research for these cases. You actually go to find the mother themselves. You go to find the specific case and what exactly happened in the testimony. And you try to find statements that the doctors made. And the majority of the time, all you're going to find are opinion pieces on this. You're not going to find anything substantial, as far as I know. I haven't been keeping up with any new cases, but every single case I had ever found of a woman who supposedly wasn't allowed to get an abortion due to the state's laws, and then all of a sudden died due to, fetal complications, they were lies. All of the articles that I found, because I had to do a deep dive. What you have to do, and this is the same thing that I did for Ukraine whenever people would talk about misinformation. What I would do, Kremlin misinformation specifically, is I would research, I would look at the article that was sent to me, and then I would go to the person who wrote the article. From there, I would be able to locate where they got their source, and I kept on going down the list until I got to the original source, and bam, this actually came from the Kremlin itself. There were a few cases that I found that came straight from Kremlin news outlets, and then from there, the trail goes cold, and you can't find anything else on it at all on a lot of these cases. And that's what I found, the same thing with this. I started developing this tactic doing this, and then I started doing it for domestic cases here that would occur, and I would keep on going down and down and down and down, and all I would see are just these ridiculous opinion pieces. I would never find anything of substance at all.
I can appreciate, that it is hard to find things, and, even like right now, I'm trying to pull some information up, but I'm not having as much luck as I normally do Googling things.
Yeah.
So, I don't really have anything to give to you. I can tell you from, personal experience of having, experienced a miscarriage, that it's a very emotionally trying event. And I could only imagine what that's like for somebody because the issue isn't really where the baby is dead in the womb or the fetus is dead in the womb. Because you're right. There is no question about that. The thing is, when you have there's specific terms. And, when I was ready for an abortion conversation several months ago, I knew what it was, but it's a medical condition where the spine's forming wrong, or where the brain's forming outside of the skull, if I'm remembering correctly. And the fetus is still technically alive, but it's not going to survive. And carrying it in the condition that it's in is at more of a risk to the mother than to actually have it aborted. And, that's at least one story that, I heard and I believe I went and actually saw the video, and, it's the husband and the wife telling their story that, they kept going to the hospital like, hey, I've got, this is going on. And the hospital kept telling him, well, go home. And it's not so much that there was a specific law preventing the doctors from doing the procedure, as much as there wasn't enough clarification in the laws to make the doctors feel comfortable to do the procedure without fearing risk of prosecution. And, all I know is that's what the doctors said. This is what, these people said were their experience. And, when it comes to the overarching thing of abortion, what I would say is, in the future, if we get to a point where that a woman's life's not going to be in danger, then we, just through the process of pregnancy, then we really have something to start to look at and debate. Because, I'm never going to tell somebody else that you have to do something if it puts your life at risk. And if we get to a point where that's no longer the case, well, now, hey, that could be adopted. And, one of the things that I'd heard Native Americans, kind of to your point about, I think a little bit of your point about rape and incest, and the people, the children of rape that, have kind of, spoke about, that they're here. Native Americans, they had children from when the women were raped by the white, colonists that came over to America. But that was part of their society, part of their culture. And they had that idea. This is a life. That life is new. It's innocent. It is separate from that act. And that is something that takes a bit of society, to catch up with what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
and I know that was kind of, and I know that was kind of an adopted mindset due to the warring tribes between one another. And also, I know that occurred between tribes. So I'm trying to recall specifically two warring tribes, but I know exactly what you're talking about there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in that case, I think one of the things that we also have to be conscious about as, a society is if we're going to tell somebody that they have to do something, if we're going to make a law about it, we need to be comprehensive in our understanding of the full scope of that law. Because if you're going to say, hey, you can't just get an abortion because you don't want to have a child, you're welcome to put it up for adoption. That process is physiologically a hard process when you're talking about having to give a child up. If we're going to make a law that says, hey, you have to give a child up, I think as a society, we put ourselves on the hook for taking care of that mother's mental health, to give her treatment after the fact. Because, if she chose an abortion, that's her decision. That's her deal to pay for, foot the bill, and deal with all of, any of that mental health issues that might arise afterwards. But as a society, if we're going to tell a woman, hey, you have to have a child, and then we're going to be like, and you can give it up for, there's two branches here. There's the giving it up for adoption. You have, if they go that route, we should be giving these people the proper mental health. And if we're going to do it, that needs to be part of the process that's in that law, rather than, well, you're going to have to do this. And then, if you suffer a breakdown or whatever, that's on you.
I think
That's
what
one route I see. What's your thought?
Yeah, so and to kind of cap off of that, the adoption system itself needs to be improved, because it's not the fact that people don't want to adopt. It's not that at all, because there are over 1,200,000 people, last that I checked, that want to adopt and are in line to adopt, and there's over 400,000 kids up for adoption. The issue isn't at all with, a lack of people wanting to adopt. The issue is with the adoption system, and I'm sure you and I are going to agree fully on that. That needs improved drastically. It's wildly ridiculous. And then you have these teenagers who could have had a home, because there are plenty of families that would adopt teenagers, and then they end up growing out of the adoption centers and going down a negative path, because that's typically what occurs, because of how ridiculous the adoption process is. But then to talk about your points of getting kind of mental care to the mother, I know that's going to be, you're talking about, I suppose, optional type therapy care for the mother, I assume. And I can see the thought process behind that. I mean, overall, my mindset is, I would prefer people just be smart about the way they have sex to begin with if they don't want to have a child. And for me, I don't want to make this sound bad. I mean, I have had smart sex a lot. I'm good about making the decisions, because I'm not ready to have a kid yet. And if I can do that, and I used to be one of the most irresponsible people on earth. I would go out party, but the one thing that wasn't irresponsible about me was the fact that I was very conscious about the fact that I'm not ready to have a kid yet. Look at me. I'm here. I'm in the military. I'm partying all the time. I'm drinking. Who am I to take care of a kid, especially if I get sent off to war and I die? Then I'm not going to be there to take care of the kid, and that then brings up the other complicating factor, where a two-parent household statistically improves the outcome of children in the future. If you have a two-parent household, then the child is, 100 times more likely to become successful or responsible growing up and not go down a bad path. So what frustrates me about a lot of these cases is just the fact that people are just stupid and irresponsible. And it's like, if you don't want to have a kid, you're not ready for it, then you need to make the right decision. And if you do end up, getting pregnant, that's going to be your responsibility. To me, that's a life that's growing inside of you. That is a human being. It doesn't matter what people want to mitigate the people want to downplay, I guess, what it is growing inside of a mother. It is people call it, it's a potential human being. Yes, I mean, it is a potential human being. Well, they'll say it's a potential life. That's what they call it. And I'm like, well, it's a potential human being. That is a human being growing inside of you that, if you raise the human being right, it can grow to become a great human being. I mean, personally, I can't see any justification for aborting a child just because you were irresponsible, having sex. I don't think that should fall back on an innocent child that has nothing to do with your irresponsible decisions. From there, it's time to grow up, and it's time to start making good decisions, especially for the future of your child, and start preparing for this future. And, you know, if it was a one-night stand with a man, you better start talking to him about staying around and being a parent and telling him that you're going to keep this baby. And the responsibility has to fall back on the man as well. It's overall, it's just a very frustrating kind of situation. And I can see how it's also frustrating for the people on the receiving end as well. And also, I can also see the heartbreak, you know, that occurs with abortion. I can also see the heartbreak that occurs with adoption as well, having to put the kids up to adoption. And I understand that some circumstances are just so horrific for people that, you know, maybe they don't want their kid growing up in the ghetto, and it's just this mom who, you know, had this guy who's going around having sex with a bunch of women, and he's definitely not going to be around, and you're at a dead-end job where you're making, like, you know, $10 an hour. It's like very complicated situation. Overall, things would be much better if the adoption system was improved, and things would be much better if people were educated a little bit better on the responsibilities and the consequences of having sex in general and what comes with that. If people just understood when you have sex, there's potential for a baby. And that's the simplest thing.
That is a fact of the act. Not meaning to rhyme it. It just happened. But you know, one of the podcasts that I watch a lot is On Purpose with Jay Shetty, and he ends his with, you know, a final five. And the last question is always, if there was one law that you could make, what would it be? And, you know, the law that I've always felt that would mean maybe the most to me is a law that says, you know, we really need a law that says you need to mind your own business in things that don't directly impact you. And, you know, in that respect, that's really where I come down on abortion. Like, when I say a man doesn't have a place in the discussion, I don't mean the man whose child that is doesn't have a place in the discussion. They do belong at the table in the discussion. But just if we're going to talk about it in general, you know, what you decide to do with your life and your family and your decisions, as long as you're not, you know, directly hurting me or my family, you know, if you're going to go out and be wild and then have a bunch of abortions, you know, we have free will and it's your choice. And that's not something that reasonably directly impacts me.
So I have a question. So I understand what you're saying. Just to kind of steelman your position a little bit, that way you can tell me if I'm on the right track. You're basically saying that you think that it's okay for a man who's directly in the situation with the mother to have an opinion on it, but not for anybody on the outside to have an opinion on it, correct?
I mean, other than a medical professional, I don't know that you need me to put caveat in, but no, I mean, obviously.
Yeah, just the general population of men. But you can have an opinion, though, on, for example, Columbine and the shooter going in there and killing everybody. And I know this is a very drastic type comparison here, but you would agree that you could have an opinion on that and say that, yes, what those two kids did was absolutely horrific. It was terrible that they did that. They should have never taken those lives.
But it directly impacted someone else's life. If those two kids just shot themselves, like, you know, they shot themselves. But they went and they killed a bunch of other people. And those were, potentially that'd be if, something had happened when my kids were in school and one of them got shot. That is a direct act against someone else. That's, this, you're giving agency to, the fetus, the unborn child. The funny thing is, people who get really passionate about this get really funny about what you want to call a unborn baby, whether it's a potential human, an unborn baby, a fetus, an embryo, and depending on which side you're on, but I don't think that's technically a proper term, but I'd have to look it up. I believe that's an egg and a sperm or zygotes, and when they come together, that's when you get an embryo. But
a lot of people use that terminology.
But the thing is, say you decide you want to have kids someday. How you choose to discipline your kids within reason, that's on you, And
well,
you
just said it right there, though. You just said it right there, that you said within reason. So within reason, there's a certain reason, a certain sphere that people should operate within. That's kind of a sphere you would, I guess, if you're secular, you would call it, secularists can't really submit to morality, but you would appeal more to the emotion, the emotional route and what affects the child, and you would look as somebody on the outside and have your own opinions about it and say, yeah, that's not right. You shouldn't be whipping your child like that just because your child, accidentally, knocked over a vase, or and that was kind of the point where I was getting to with the Columbine thing. Is like it doesn't directly impact you in that moment. Now you could see the potential impact over in the future, if there's copycats, I suppose, if you want to go that route. But that event directly doesn't affect you, it affects other people. And that was kind of my point is, say the father is involved, but the father doesn't actually get a say in it, just the mother gets a say. The father is one of the people directly involved that I think should actually have a pretty significant say when it comes to that kind of thing. And other people also should kind of have a say on that too, because again, I do see them as babies and fetuses. I mean, like you said, people get weird about the definition. Fetus is just Latin for offspring, and offspring is just child, baby, whatever. But I mean, to me, I see that as a life. I see that as a
So Brandon and I's conversation got cut short when a forklift driver came over and asked me to move my truck so that he could get to some stuff that was on the other side of it. And once I got done moving the truck, we decided to go ahead and kind of call it a wrap for the interview portion. He and I chatted for a little bit afterwards, but I wanted to make sure I said thank you again to Brandon for being the first guest on the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation and look forward to putting up more conversations for you soon. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and then like, comment, and share the video with all your friends. Hope you're having a wonderful evening, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye.